In every single workplace, there's this invisible economy running in the background. It's the thing that really determines who gets ahead and who gets left behind. And it's not about money. It's about something just as powerful: respect. So let's break it down.
Okay, so let's get personal for a second. Would you take a pay cut for a job where you felt deeply respected? Or would you put up with a terrible boss for a massive salary? It's a really tough question, isn't it? Because respect isn't just some nice-to-have, fluffy feeling. It's a fundamental part of how we get paid.
And look, this isn't just a hunch. The data from Gallup is pretty shocking. Only 37% of employees in the US strongly agree that they're treated with respect at work. That's a record low. Think about that. The huge majority of the workforce is walking around feeling undervalued. This is a massive issue. So we're going to call this problem what it is: the respect deficit. It's this widespread shortage of a totally crucial resource at work, and it has very real consequences for everything from morale to productivity and ultimately to who succeeds. To really wrap our heads around this deficit, we have to shift our thinking a little bit. What if respect isn't just that warm, fuzzy feeling you get when your boss says, "Good job"? What if it's an actual form of currency? Something you can earn, spend, invest, and yeah, even hoard, just like actual money.
Thinking about respect like it's money, well, it helps us map out this hidden economy of work. And believe it or not, this idea has a surprisingly deep history. All right, so here's the key idea. Respect currency is this informal system of rewards that grants real advantages. If you're respect rich, you get the benefit of the doubt, you get the better assignments, you get more opportunities. But if you're respect poor, man, you're fighting an uphill battle for every single bit of recognition. And you know what? This idea isn't new at all. Way back in 1935, the brilliant sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois noticed something fascinating in the American South. He saw that poor white workers who were paid terribly were still getting another kind of compensation: a public and psychological wage. So what exactly did this psychological wage get you? Well, as Du Bois laid out, it bought them public deference, being called sir or ma'am, titles that were denied to Black people. It got them into better public places, better schools. It even meant getting treated more leniently by the law. Bottom line, they were getting paid in the currency of social status and dignity. And here's the really clever, or maybe sinister part. This payment in respect wasn't some accident. It was strategic. It drove a huge wedge between the workers. By giving one group this symbolic status boost, the folks in power made sure that poor white and Black workers would never team up to demand better wages for everyone. Respect was literally used to keep things exactly as they were. Okay, so if respect is a currency, why do some people end up billionaires while others are left struggling? Well, it all comes down to a kind of snowball effect, where tiny early advantages grow into these massive, unshakable inequalities. Political scientist Paul Pearson has a great name for this: path dependence. The main takeaway is super simple. The beginning is everything. A small, even accidental head start can kick off this rich get richer cycle that becomes almost impossible to stop. History doesn't just unfold, it gets locked into a specific path. I know, that sounds a little academic, right? So let's make it super clear with a simple but powerful thought experiment called the Polya's urn. It perfectly shows how this whole path dependence thing works. Okay, picture this. You have an urn with one red ball and one blue ball. You reach in, you pull one out, and then you put it back, along with another ball of the same color. So now, the next time you draw, the odds are already slightly biased. A few lucky draws for blue at the very beginning can make blue totally dominant, not because blue is better, but because of pure random chance at the start. The advantage just snowballs until it gets locked in. All right, so how does a jar of balls have anything to do with your office? Well, let's imagine two new interns starting on the same day. They're equally qualified, equally smart. Let's call them Alice and Bob. Imagine this. Day one, Alice finds out she and the manager are both obsessed with the same niche TV show. That little connection, that's her first blue ball. It's an instant rapport. Suddenly, she's seen as promising and gets handed a cool project. Bob, just as talented, doesn't have that random connection, so he gets the routine stuff. Alice's small advantage in respect currency starts to snowball. She gets more chances, she builds her skills and confidence, while Bob is stuck trying to prove himself.
And just like that, their paths are set.
Look, this isn't just some old history lesson or a neat theory. The hard data from today shows that the psychological wage is still very much a thing in modern workplaces.
What this really means is that first hit of respect, that benefit of the doubt, well, it's not handed out randomly. It often flows along these pre-existing social lines, whether we realize it or not.
And we have the data to prove it. A huge study in 2023 looked at nearly 1 million employee reviews, and the results? Well, they were pretty stark. When it came to rating things like company culture and their managers, Asian and white employees consistently reported much more positive experiences than their Black colleagues.
And here's the kicker. This isn't about blaming bad companies. The gap was there even within the very same firm. It points to a deep, systemic issue. An intangible respect dividend is still being paid out, often unconsciously, along these historical lines.
Okay, I know this all sounds a little depressing, but here's the good news. The theory itself actually gives us hope. If the system is created by these small, early events, well, then we can change those events and set a new, better path. And that right there is the key. The system isn't unbreakable. Because it's so sensitive to those initial conditions, any deliberate, early changes can have a huge impact. We can actually choose to start a whole new snowball effect, a better one. So how do we actually do that? Well, it starts with being intentional. Companies can literally track respect like any other business goal. They can create structured mentorship programs so everyone gets support, not just the lucky few. Increasing diversity in leadership fundamentally changes our unconscious picture of who looks like a leader. At the end of the day, it's about building systems, from union contracts to better training, that distribute dignity fairly, right from the very start. And all this brings us to one final question. And this one's for you. I want you to really think about your own workplace. Who holds the power to create or mint the respect currency? Who gets the benefit of the doubt and who has to fight for it? And most importantly, what small, early intervention could you make to start a new snowball, to make sure this powerful, invisible currency is shared more fairly with everyone?